Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here on day 2 of the 2022 Rich Earth Summit. This is our 8th annual summit, and we're very happy to have you joining us. I'm very excited about how the summit has grown over the years and how this world of urine diversion and productive sanitation seems to be growing wider and deeper every year and maturing and bringing more and more people together. So we're just thrilled to be part of bringing people together and hearing all the wonderful findings and ideas and inspiration that people are bringing to this sharing on these 3 days. So we're kicking off this second day. We have our first session is about community knowledge and social change, and then we'll have 2 technical research sessions. And this first session will be moderated by Jamina Shupak. She is the assistant director here at the Rich Earth Institute, and she'll be taking it from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Abe. Hey, folks. As everyone said, it's so fun to just be in a room with people who are excited to dive into these conversations. As Abe said, we're going to jump into an entire session on community knowledge and social change. And just as a reminder for folks about questions, we'll take all the questions at the end and ask all the speakers at the end. So if you can type any questions in the chat, and we'll be tracking those, and make sure to get as many questions answered as possible. Sometimes speakers will just go ahead and answer questions in real time in the chat, so keep an eye out. That might be happening as well. And so if everyone makes sure that they are muted, if they're not presenting, we will go ahead and dive in. Our first presenter, I know you already miss her. She already stepped away, but don't worry, you'll get to see her many, many times. We're going to start with Julia Cavicchi and Tatiana Schreiber from our own Rich Earth Institute. And I didn't get her permission to say this already, but it is her birthday today, Julia's. So if you want to wish her a little happy birthday in the chat, I don't think she would be angry about that. So they're going to speak their talk is entitled Initial Findings from Rich Earth's Urine My Garden Community Science Survey. Julia Cavicchi, beyond being the queen of the summit, is Rich Earth's education director. She coordinates our community engagement and education programs, runs Rich Earth's Urine My Garden program, which includes hosting free webinars and disseminating home use guides, a community science survey, and urine collection kits via our new Etsy page. Tatiana Schreiber is the social research director at the Rich Earth Institute, with a particular focus on working with and learning from farmers about their interests and needs. She also coordinates Rich Earth's demonstration garden on site here at Rich Earth Research Center. So without further ado, Julia, you want to pop back over here?
Thank you, Jamina. So yeah, we'll be getting us started today with a little bit of a presentation of our own about some of the work we've been doing over the past couple of years on home garden education. Let me just get my new screen share going here. All right, is everyone seeing the P cycle on your screens being shared? Quite seeing nods yet, but I will presume that it is indeed sharing. Okay, great. So we're going to tell you a little bit about some of what we've been doing on the home garden education front. And let me just disable this transcript here. It's a little bit distracting. Great. So just to give you an overview of what this program is, we've been working to do home garden education in part to support the many people around the world who are doing this already. And also because we know that the kind of large infrastructural scale change. So as I was saying, this home garden education program is kind of a way of helping to build the peace cycling movement by supporting these bases of home gardeners around the world who can maybe eventually someday grow into communities that are interested in larger scale implementation. People often ask us, like, what do I do with my winter pea? I'm collecting far more pea than I can use in my garden. And the kind of answer to that is, well, you can start your own community scale program and start collecting your urine for local farms as well. So it's kind of part of this bigger theory of change that we have. So we've had about 300 participants in our webinar over the years, about 72% of whom had never fertilized with urine before. And then we've had about 70 respondents to our community science survey, about 60% of whom are over the age of 55, which we think is really interesting because it shows perhaps that there's kind of a generational knowledge that folks have, or we're not totally sure why, but we think that's kind of an interesting fact of who's contributing to our survey. Move along here. You can see that folks have been taking our survey from around the world. And, as we know, many people around the world have been fertilizing with urine for centuries. And so our survey is kind of a way to gather some of the knowledge that different communities have been building about this practice. And we hope to kind of further increase our international responses as we expand this program as well. Through our survey, we've tracked almost 5,000 gallons of, all right, this time we have not lost internet, just an error message. Okay, around 5,000 gallons of urine that people have reclaimed as a fertilizer every year through our survey, which is pretty cool to see that, beyond our, Rich Earth here in Brattleboro collects around 12,000 gallons every year with our program, but it's cool to see that even at the small scale, this kind of cumulative impact can be created through people reclaiming their own nutrients themselves. It's also been cool to see the wide range of methods that folks are using to fertilize with urine. This is just kind of a spectrum of some of the ways that people have been saying.
There seems to be some audio problems again. And folks,
just gonna ask folks to mute if you're not already, so we can have good audio. So one of the questions in our survey is, how do you collect your urine? And it's so cool to see the broad diversity of ways that people do collect and then apply the urine in their gardens. And now I'll pass it off to Tatiana. Thanks, Tatiana.
okay, can folks hear me? Uh-oh.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, yes, you can. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay. All right. So, yeah, so we're finding some really interesting things with this survey result so far. One of the things people is to mix their nitrogen fertilizer substances. It could be a valuable amendment. So these are some of the things that people have mixed it with biochar to activate the biochar, with compost to increase the nitrogen content of the compost, with wood ash to neutralize or make more somewhat less neutral the ash, or the ash, with straw bale to accelerate the decomposition and help decompose. So next slide, Julia. So rather than so there's many we also ask people if they dilute the urine and how much do they do. Rather than dilute it, some people pay attention to the weather and apply before or during rain, but many people do dilute the urine before applying, and the most common range that they use is between 1 to 3 or 3 to 1 and 5 to 1 water to urine. More people dilute than do not dilute, but we have found in our own research and Rich Earth that undiluted urine doesn't harm hay when applied in the appropriate amounts. The next slide. And another question we ask is whether using urine has replaced the use of other commercial fertilizers that people have bought. And, many have not previously been using commercial fertilizers. In any case, they're just using compost or natural homemade fertilizers. But others are finding they can use urine to replace or augment their fertilizer purchases, especially high nitrogen and expensive products like blood meal. Next. And in terms of the crops that are being fertilized with urine, wide range of crops that people are using it on. Not surprisingly, the largest or most common, most frequent is using it on crops that have high nitrogen needs, such as tomatoes, corn, things like that. But they also use it on a wide range of other crops and are often experiencing very positive results. For example, in our demonstration garden, we used it on peppers and got very, very high production of these peppers this year. So that's just interesting. Of course, we have only limited data so far. So we really hope to expand our community science work to gather a lot more information about best uses. But, interestingly, there's a high interest in using it on fruit trees, ornamentals, small fruits like raspberries, things like that. Next. Using urine, including on plantains and things like that. Maybe we can just go to the next one. Oh, there we are. There's the images. So those are the peppers from our garden. Bonus uses. People are finding a number of other beneficial uses, such as reducing insect damage. One person felt that using urine early on their eggplant crop helped the eggplant to grow faster and outgrow the most damaging period for flea beetles, for example. Others are using it to deter pests like woodchucks. One person found urine to be effective at reducing Japanese knotweed with repeated applications. So obviously a lot more data is needed on these other uses, but very interesting to find out what people are doing. Next. Okay, and so, oh yeah, Julia, this is your slide.
Thanks, Tatiana. And sorry, folks, if you're having difficulty hearing us, we're experiencing a little bit of internet connection challenges, but we're hoping to get that figured out shortly, and we'll also share a clearer recording of this to everyone afterward. So thanks for your patience with that. But yeah, so then now I'll shift into kind of a second part of our home garden survey, which was more about how people are talking about their home gardens to others and how they're how it's changing kind of how they're thinking and feeling in the world, and some of those questions. So one of our questions was about whether or not folks actually do talk about their fertilization practices to others. And it was really interesting to see this very broad spectrum of people's kind of openness to talking about it with others, for everywhere from on the far left, just kind of like folks who live in homeowners associations or things like that, where they would only fertilize in the dead of night in secrecy and not tell anyone how their tomato plants did grow to be so tall and luscious, to the far opposite end of the spectrum, where people would enthusiastically talk to others about it, especially encouraged by things like new public media articles, like a recent New York Times article that came out and kind of helped encourage people to come out into the open and talk about this. Two people who land somewhere in the middle, where they kind of will let the garden speak for itself. And when folks ask why it's looking so delightfully lush, they will respond by explaining how they have fertilized it with their own urine. So that's been really interesting to learn this spectrum of approaches people take. Another question in our survey was about whether and how fertilizing with urine has changed folks' relationships to their bodies or nature in different ways. And these are some of the kind of trends of responses to that question. One trend was about just encouraging people to rethink the concept of waste and no longer thinking of their pee as a source of waste, but rather as a precious resource to be treasured. Another was around reconnecting the human role in natural ecological cycles, and kind of an emphasis on feeling reconnected to those cycles of nutrients and water. Another trend was around new feelings of intimacy with the garden, feeling closer to garden plants because you're doing this very, intimate act of sharing your nutrients with them. And then also intimacy with the watershed, and also some kind of feelings of guilt or shame around, when you do have to use a flush toilet, thinking of all of that water that's being wasted and all of those nutrients going downstream. And a last kind of change that we noticed was that fertilizing with urine really cultivated further curiosity and experimentation in folks as they were using urine in their gardens and kind of experimenting with different combinations of amendments and different amounts, because there's no kind of one prescriptive way to do it. It kind of encourages that sense of curiosity in the garden as well. I'll pass it back to Tatiana for this one.
Okay, so yeah, overall, as we kind of looked at all these results and thought about them, we kind of felt like there were two major trends in the kinds of transformation that transformative experiences that people were experiencing. Those who've been using urine for many years, as Julia said earlier, it seems like some of the older folks who had some experience from their parents or grandparents, they said things like, well, my grandfather always did this, and so they're doing it sort of intuitively, but doing it is reaffirming their understandings about their connection to ecological cycles, and talking about it and being part of this webinar and responding to the survey was just inspiring their interest in doing more experiments and refining their methods. And then the other group was the people who were really new at this, and it was kind of a light bulb moment for them, realizing the potential of using urine as a fertilizer and not thinking of it as a waste that they have to flush away somewhere, and giving them a renewed sense of connection to nature. And for those people, there's just a lot of excitement and curiosity to keep learning more.
Great. Thanks, Tatiana. I'll just briefly summarize some of our thoughts about what's next for where we want to go with this program and the survey. We hope to refine it to kind of capture more kind of detailed information now that we're kind of progressing beyond this exploratory phase of having these open-ended questions. We hope to include more of the frequently asked questions from folks, which will include in kind of updated versions of our home use guide. And then kind of do some deeper thinking about some of these bigger questions, one around the kind of theme of contamination and different perceptions folks have about that, and the other about the kind of wide range of different crops folks are fertilizing and what potential agricultural research needs there will be for that. So thanks everybody, and I'll pass it back to Jamina now.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia and Tatiana. I'm going to stop screen sharing, I believe. There we go. Great. Wonderful. I know that you've been educating a lot of new folks about using urine in their garden, so I hope that research continues to just grow and we get to just keep learning more and more from folks who are doing it all over the place. Next up, we have Corinna Schröder. And just a reminder, if you have questions from Tatiana and Julia's talk, to go ahead and put those in the chat. So Corinna will be presenting Urban Cycles, a citizen science project for sustainable fertilization with urine-based recycling fertilizers in urban gardens in Berlin. Corinna Schröder is an environmental engineer with a focus on circular economy and water management. In her scientific work, she deals with plant nutrient availability from recycling fertilizers. Currently, she is coordinating two projects, Urban Cycles, which focuses on the usage of urine-based fertilizers in urban gardens, and Zirkulierbar, which, go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong on that pronunciation, which looks at the entire circular value chain of recycling fertilizers from human excreta. Corinna, you should be able to share your screen, so go ahead and take it away. Go ahead and unmute yourself at the same time.
Thank you. I'm going to try now. So can you see? No, you can't.
We're seeing your screen, but we're not seeing it in like sharing the
Ah,
slides.
Can
There we
you
go.
see the slides now? Perfect.
Yes,
In
that's
the
great.
right mode also? Perfect. Yeah, thank you for your for the nice introduction. Yeah, I'm presenting to you today the project Urban Cycles, which is a citizen science project for sustainable fertilization with urine-based recycling fertilizers in urban gardens in Berlin, in Germany. And it's a small-scale funded project which goes for 3 months from March till November this year. So it's almost finished and was initiated by the IGZ. It's the institute where I'm working. And it's with expertise in horticulture and fertilization. And we are working together with the DLR, with the German Aerospace Center, which is researching on the production of urine-based fertilizers. As a horticultural institute, we contribute to knowledge that helps to produce healthy food in a sustainable way. And this also includes circular approaches and recycling fertilizers. And as the nutrients that leave our bodies are filtered in energy-intensive wastewater treatment plants, and still high amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus end up in water bodies and pollute them, urine is a very critical resource for the nutrient recovery from wastewater. It's furthermore interesting for us because it can be combined also with the filtration of pollutants like pharmaceuticals. And thus, in our institute, we focus on the horticultural usage of recycling fertilizers from urine. And we already conducted a few experiments, pot experiments, but hydroponic experiments, and also field experiments. And now what we want to do, or what we wanted to do with the Urban Cycles project, is a proof of concept under real conditions with the citizen science approach. Yeah, the idea is that gardeners from private gardens, community and school gardens in Berlin can conduct and document their own fertilization experiments with urine-based recycling fertilizers for one growth season, and with the in being supported and supervised by us. And the objective is to communicate about sustainable fertilization and recycling fertilizers, on recycling fertilizers. The fertilizer that we use is called Production and is developed by the Aerospace Center, who want to also clothes for food production in space and on Earth. And the biological filters, they can process urine or also manure, and they have different systems for terrestrial and space applications. The filter itself is a trickling filter filled with lava, which serves as a growing surface for microorganisms. And the urine trickles through and there gets into contact with the microorganisms, which convert the urine to plant available and stable forms of nitrogen. And a filter like this can process 0.5 liter of urine per day. The filters run with different types of input streams, and the fertilizer that we use from this crop system is made from synthetic urine, which was mixed in a lab, which was a very great advantage for us because in Germany there's no legal basis for the use of urine in horticulture, so we would have needed a special permission for that. Yeah, and as a in preparation for the project, we reached out to urban gardeners from Berlin to find people who are interested in joining our project, and we started in March with around 15 gardens. And in the first workshop, we gave them input about plant nutrition, what the soil consists of, how do plants interact with the soil, what are nutrients, what do plants need, and what does a healthy soil mean. And then we started with the individual planning of their experiments, and the gardeners were quite free in the planning of the process. The only specification that we gave to them was that they should split their experimental area in 2 identical parts, one to be fertilized with the crop fertilizer, and the other one with the bits that they wanted to use for the experiments. And the number of plants and also the size and everything was up to them. The size of the. What we also did is that we took substrate samples from their soils and made rapid tests for the stored available nitrogen in their substrates. So we could calculate the quantity of fertilizer that they should apply for the plants. They also documented the experiments. They did the photo documentation, and they also rated 3 plants of each treatment. So looked at the growth, appearance of the plants, the yield, and yeah, we were always available for the gardeners. So we made several Q&A sessions with them, and they could email us or phone us if they needed help. And now the experiments, so at the stage right now, the experiments are finished, and the gardeners are evaluating the results at the moment. And so I brought you an example of one gardener already to experiment with tomatoes. And so on the left side here, you can see the mean values of the height of the tomato plants. There's not such a great difference between the control and the crop fertilized plants. But on the left side, you see that she got quite a good yield from the crop plants compared to the control. So at least in this case, it was the urine fertilizer was quite good. And yeah, the other results we don't know yet. And we want to therefore do a closing workshop with all the gardeners together, where we will look at all the results. So the gardeners will present the results in this workshop, and we will discuss it together, and they can give us also some feedback, what went well and what we could have improved and could be improved. And we also want to do a little harvest festival and taste some of the veggies if there are still some left. And yeah, so, and what we also are preparing at the moment is some educational material for multiplying the knowledge that we gathered over the year, and we want to put this into low threshold formats for further communication. So we want to do a sign and simple language. We are preparing some infographics, and we also made some videos that are in editing at the moment. Yes, and with this, I would like to thank you a lot for your attention, and thank you. Questions at the end? No, it was like of the whole, or questions now? I forgot.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Corinna. There we are. We're back. Wonderful. Thank you, Corinna, for that. Apologies for any of the glitchiness. Even this far into Zoom, we still have those things happening. We look forward to hearing the evolution of that project for always and always. Next up, we have Sarah Nahar with University of Syracuse, who will be presenting on a glimpse into global sanitation justice initiatives. So Sarah, if you are able to share your screen and unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Great.
Super.
We are seeing your screen.
Fantastic. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sarah Nahar, and I am really excited to be with you here in this way that we are today. I think that we can continue to expect glitches in all sorts of technologies, both just on Zoom, but also in many of the systems that some in the overdeveloped world, I would say, have come to rely on. And I think that really puts us in a position to continue to return to our bodies and to that which is most important. So this is just a picture from Mount Longonot in Kenya. I have a few slides here out of order for you that are just showing a bit of what I learned in Kenya, because Chelsea already mentioned yesterday Soil Haiti. I recommend that you look them up, and this just be a few glimpses of what I saw. It is working with folks who are doing some urine diversion, and mostly though collecting the solid discard, so poop or shit or poo. I mean, we don't have a neutral term for it in English, which is part of the issue. In any case, and I know that both Sanergy and Sanitation, which are the orgs that I'll briefly speak about before talking more broadly about social justice, are not currently doing much with the urine that they collect, though they do divert it. And in fact, folks from Rich Earth Institute have been in Kenya, like trying to encourage that. However, similar to what Chelsea said yesterday, the circular economy mechanism has not matured there in terms of what might be possible with urine. And hopefully it does soon, but we can do our work wherever we are to just continue to raise the conversation and normalize this. So the data that you all got from the gardens make a lot of sense. This is Joseph here showing at least how one toilet works, and then I'll page back here. This is Florian showing me about for the people who operate these Fresh Life toilets. They're also given a cleaning kit as well. And I think I would like to now start the presentation all the way back here, so you just get a preview of what we're going to see. So that is what it is. Here's Sanergy. This is a mega scale project, able to do about like 700,000 tons or something of particularly of poop every year, and they are unabashed about the scale that they want to create for what they call secondary cities. These are cities that are growing by leaps and bounds. A lot of that is because of neoliberal capitalist dispossession of small farmers, and all those folks are headed to the cities, and they are coming to places that do not have infrastructure set up, nor can set up infrastructure too fast. So this is Sanergy's like encouragement to the rest of their folks to continue on making the sanitation journey bigger across Eastern and Southern Africa. Here is what it looks like. So one of these Fresh Life toilets can be set up, and an operator can work one. They basically put up some of the money and then regain the money by charging people to use the urine diverting Fresh Life toilets. And here I am talking with an operator and one of the workers from Sanergy. These workers, the person in the middle, I was interviewing the toilet operator about her perspective, but there's also like community organizers that basically spread the word about what is possible, about the precarity and also potential if you want to be an owner operator of one of these kind of franchise models of toilets, kind of what's at stake if you do that. I just want to highlight that Kenya is just basically in a place where they're saying, look, we know there's an issue. We know we need to do something about it. So they can no longer be in denial, as much of the global north is, particularly the US, where I'm from. And they're like, how do we address it without addressing also the colonial mentality? Colonial mentality means the porcelain throne is the highest status symbol that you can have when it comes to toileting. This is not a coincidence. Already in 1891, John Burke wrote this anthropological tome called The Scatological Rights of All Nations. And basically, if I could sum up like 500 pages in a couple sentences, it would just be looking and judging people on the kind of savage to civilized range as how proximate or lack of proximity they had to the porcelain throne. And examined how many peoples all around the world were using their excrement and probably urine as well in terms of their life, how they were doing reintegration. There was a myriad of ways, but it was all ill-judged by a European, Euro-American gaze on this situation. So advertising campaigns are as important to social change as the actual materials to do the work. And I think that some of the REI data that we just heard also proves that. So in Naivasha, where there's a beautiful lake, moving to now the organization called Sanitation. These are called honeysuckers, which I think is a hilarious euphemism. Anyway, they go and pump the pit latrines. So Sanitation, which both Sanergy and Sanitation are for profit. So they have like exited the nonprofit realm and the way that kind of nonprofits operate across the globe to say like, no, we want to do for profit, because then our customers get to dictate what we do and we have to play into a market, and they're actually trying to create markets. So that is something we can think about in terms of what that means in terms of further entrenchment into capitalism as these innovations come, as well as both of them say we work closely with municipalities, not in the old version of private-public partnership, but a new one, because recognize that sanitation is a public good. Just as Chelsea said, it will never not have a cost, but taking some of the burden off of municipalities, and then they're making money off of that. So in any case, Sanitation is able to divert a bunch of these exhauster trucks from going to an overtaxed wastewater plant in Naivasha. And through a series of different cement tubes and soaking devices, which I'm showing you here, they do their own separation. And then the urine is allowed to flow slowly back down the hill, mostly underground, to the wastewater treatment plant, which is now not as overwhelmed because all of the solids are coming to Sanitation. And here they are, just like moving through a tea bag, like you have coffee grounds. And so the solids are staying. And then they're going to go through a huge furnace, the solids are, and the urine is going to run back to be processed at the wastewater. And these solids are put through a furnace and these tubes, and then come through what is essentially a sausage maker, but basically it gets pressed into briquettes. And these briquettes are then able to be used for heating. I want to show you one. Came back with a souvenir. Do not know if this was legal to traffic across the national, but it should be because it's sterile, and they're getting mega contracts with international orgs that are like working in Kenya and using this briquette, which is wood chips and poop, and can be anything from 80% wood chips to 20% poop, or 20% wood chips to 8% poop. So like it can be a huge range. And then by having a briquette, that's going to reduce deforestation, because people otherwise will want to have a charcoal briquette and simultaneously also be able to create a circular economy product. Just to finish up the slideshow really briefly, here again, urine diversion is on people's minds. So what is cool about these innovations is that even though they're not working directly with the urine, and a lot of it is going into leach fields, etc., they've set their technology up to be able to in the future. So I thought that was really impressive, honestly. So poop in the hole, and then pee drains down there. This is sloping a little bit. Here's like a collective urinal that is at least trying to be able to create dignified places to poop and pee. Because a lot of the issues with sanitation justice have to do with not having a place that you can be able to release in peace. Part of that has to do with customer service. So this is one of the sisters that's working with Sanitation, and she is the host for the bathroom. Yes, partially there around payment, but mostly there for customer service. And this is what makes Sanitation like toilets stand out over others, is because like you're accompanied when you're about to use this new technology. And so that's pretty cool. And then underneath, it looks like this. This is for the paper, and this is for the poop. So they collect it that way. So that is what I want to say in terms of like what it means to learn from another place and like kind of bring that learning home. Both projects are actually US and Kenyan run, and some of the US folks that are there would have definitely tried this in the US if it would have been possible, but it wasn't remotely socially accessible, nor was there grants for that, nor was there room. And so what I hope that this can do is to help guide us toward thinking about how like leadership from the global South in these types of questions. Now, I am at time, but I would like to just put a little teaser in for some of the things I would like to talk about during the question and answer if we have a chance. One is kind of the framework of sanitation justice. Particularly, I call the work I'm doing defecatory justice, though, you know, being around a lot of people like you all are, I'm thinking about maybe changing the term to excretory justice. Like urinary justice doesn't sound right. It sounds like fighting an infection, but I'm trying to think about what it's like. And it may be that sanitation justice is a term that we can use and connect it to other interrelated, like various forms of justice that we need: justice in the healing area, racial justice, justice in the carceral system. Like all these other types of justice work together because it's about how people are thinking about what is disposable, who is disposable, how those start to tend to run together. Samantha McBride's question yesterday was really clutch around who will be emptying a lot of the urine vats when we do this at scale. How we'll make sure that those jobs are dignified, that, you know, the ways in which we think about how what we discard is not shameful, but can participate in a broader cycle. How will that translate to the workers who are doing that work? And just where I'm like flagging this with is like in 1968, Dr. King was assassinated while in Memphis, marching alongside garbage workers who did not have dignified work. And if we think about garbage as the kind of municipal solids that we are discarding, what is the intervention that is possible to be made there? And also the other piece I want to point to is like people will be interested in working on some of these new things if they feel solidarity in the broader other concerns that they have about dignified life. So in Jackson, Mississippi, for example, or these southern hurricane crises that have happened, which show how sewage in the United States is breaking down and buckling, people be more responsive to innovations and technology if they're sure that the people who are coming like have relationships in the community, are committed to other things like educational justice. And so as we think about deepening our work and the organizing challenges around sanitation justice, it's about deeper and broader solidarities. To close, I'll say that here at Syracuse University and at the nearby State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry, where I'm working, I convinced the Food Studies department that I should do a certificate there because sanitation justice, I think, is the back end of food justice. So I think that is an up and coming movement that we can really have a deeper connection with in terms of how they're organizing, transforming the food system. And there's a lot of potential allies there. I'll pause there for now and looking forward to questions.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much, Sarah. I want to just listen to you all day, talk about, not listen to you, but engage with you and have a conversation with you all day about social sanitation justice. And I just really appreciate those pictures and getting to see those different systems and making sure that those voices were included in those systems being created. And thank you so much. So we are going to move over to Marine Legrand, and we'll be presenting Urban Uses of Urine as a Fertilizer, a Field Study in France by Léa Weingard, Marine Legrand, Bernard de Gouvello, and Sabine Barlet. Rooted in environmental anthropology, Marine's research focuses on the greening of city making in post-industrial contexts. Within the OCAPI research program, she works on the emergence of new modes of management of human excreta in France and the renewal of knowledge, practices, and imaginaries related to ecological sanitation. Also interested in an art science approach to body fluids, waste, fermentation, and rotting. So if you are able to share your screen and unmute yourself.
Hello, everybody. Do you hear me well?
Yes, indeed.
Right. So do this and then let's go. So you hear my screen? If I do this, do you see the diaporama? I'll let it in this presentation. Otherwise, it would be problematic. Okay, so I'm talking about gardening as an alternative urine management practice at home and in community gardens, based on a field study in Paris region, which was conducted by Léa Vengart, student supervised by myself, Bernard de Goubello, and Sabine Barle this year. Léa is a student in urban planning. And I'm an anthropologist. Bernard de Goubello is a sociologist, and Sabine Barle is a famous, as someone said, geographer and historian of waste and territorial ecology. So the context of this study is the emergence of excreta source separation in urban context in France. As a matter of fact, ecological sanitation has been rising for decades in France, but not at all in urban context, until maybe a decade ago, when several research projects have been launched, and in particular the OCAPI research program, which I'm a part of, which is an interdisciplinary research program on nutrient flows in urban environments and what we call nutrition expression systems, meaning thinking about sanitation and fertilization as a whole. You are familiar with this, with a territorial ecology approach mixed with social sciences, approaches and agronomy, and a focus on collaborative action research. The context is also the identification by our research team of almost 20 collective projects in urban context, which are quite recent, maybe like 5 years old for the oldest, in participatory housing, eco-neighborhoods, but also buildings recalling the public and office building. But we're not exactly at the takeoff phase in France, not like in Sweden or maybe in other countries. We are still in an emerging phase, which is quite important in Paris region. There are several reasons for that, maybe because we have political support for this subject, notably in Paris, and we have this research program, OCAPI, which is really also lobbying program, so with some effects and with an investment of public agencies on the subject, which is not exactly the case in other places. In other regions in France, the subject is more developed in rural areas, but that's not the subject here. That's why it's not present on this map. The question of the study, the first one was, are there urban pea cyclers in Paris region, meaning in domestic place, individuals that conduct this kind of experimentations, or maybe community experience that are not linked to institutional projects? Is there a social movement there? And we have this a priori that alternative urine management practice are informal and marginal in urban context in France. And we have this question, do they have the potential to question the conventional sanitation system at this stage by producing new experiences, practices, imaginaries in places where you can't develop compost toilets, for example? So what about pea cycling? So the methodology was an ethnographic field study, a short one, several months, is conducted in Paris region with 20 people interviewed, which were identified through interknowledge, the OCAPI program, personal and professional network, and also social networks like Facebook, etc., for community gardeners. And interviews were recorded, coded, and analyzed with qualitative methods. So this is just a map of the places where people were met. And yeah, just to say here that it was not easy to find these people because they are not organized. There are no community initiatives like the Rich Earth, or there is no citizen science project about urine cycling. It was really the first result was that it is effectively informal and not organized yet. So in the domestic context, we realized that application sites depend on the type of housing. And there are also different motivations and techniques that are applied, which lead us to ask the question, is urine a fertilizer in this kind of practices? So the different contexts are quite classical, but I present them here: at home, in community gardens, where it's in general not organized, but more individual practices in community gardens of some of the community gardeners. As one exception, there is one garden where it is collective, but it's the only one. And then you have this project from Louise Raguet in Paris municipality. This is a collective organized project in a workplace, but finally only one person used this pedagogic dispositif. I'm not going into details here because I don't have the time, but and Léa also interviewed pea cycling promoters, which are also individuals in France that are, for the one of them, Renaud Delos is from Belgium and Robert Cosset is from Canada, but they are really active in France for promoting pea cycling for domestic uses. So the seat of application depends on the type of housing. You have, of course, personal gardens for people living in houses and community gardens, which are also used for people that don't really have a place at home. It's one of the interviewees which live in Trunk. So what I wanted to point out here is that there are people that use public space as an application site in the city. In Léa experience, there is one interviewee, which is in this case, but in other inquiries that we have conducted, we learned that there are, I would say not a lot, but some people that pour their urine in, for example, on public lawns. There are some of them in Paris region. And there are some people that transport their urine from Paris region to the countryside in order to use it as a fertilizer. So a diversity of practices, but also a diversity of motivations. All people that use urine as a fertilizer all people that don't pee in the loo don't have an interest for urine as a fertilizer. For a lot of them, the first interest is for water resources protection, and the fact that you can use urine as a fertilizer appears as a mean to do something with this pee in order not to pour it into water. And then Léa distinguished between four categories. The first one are people that conduct experimentations with their urine about the agronomic effect. They want to see it with their eyes. Some people have more mixed motivations. Some people first want to preserve water by fertilizing when it's possible. In this case, the practice is conducted as at a random frequency, and it's less organized, less focused, but it's more now and then when the opportunity arises, and with no experimentation, no calculation. And finally, the fourth one is about people that want to free themselves from the toilet, and this is really the idea of avoid peeing in the toilet, and then they will dispose of urine as the way they can at the moment when it's possible, but with no focus on fertilization. There would be a lot more to say, but well, let's come to our final part, which is about is pea cycling in urban environment as an informal practice, a way to develop a critical approach to conventional sanitation systems. First, Léa showed that pea cycling is not a classical eco gesture, contrary to selective waste sorting, for example, or buying eco-friendly goods. Indeed, it's not integrated in the market, at least in France or institutions. There are no public awareness raising campaigns, and people that do that in Paris region, they tend to hide themselves and not to talk about it that much. It's not a practice that is shared a lot. Social norms are still quite strong against these ideas, or a priori that P-cyclers have about social norms prevent themselves from talking a lot about that. Of course, it is a taboo subject. This is self-evident, but it's still useful to recall it because it's still taboo even for P-cyclers, much of them. And urine is not something which is that easy to manage. You have the smell, you have this idea that it's dirty materially and symbolically. So it's a process for people that engage in this practice to make themselves more intimate progressively with this body fluid. And there is a learning process here, which is not that easy. So there is still a lot to do, I would say, to conclude, for making P-cycling a first step for imaginaries ecologization. It's kind of hard to say that in English, but you can read it. It's a learning process that I want to insist on that. And there is a limit in an urban environment, of course, because you have this impossibility, the structural impossibility to exit the sanitation system. So people that were engaged in the LEESU study, they all share the desire, and some of them have done that to leave the city. So that's the ending point of their trajectories. Thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to answer your questions. And you can read Leah's work on our website. It's in French, though.
Amazing. Thank you so much. If you want to go ahead and stop sharing your screen.
Sure.
Wonderful. Thanks again. And yeah, we always talk about we need a diversity of solutions and perspectives and whatnot, and seeing that the different quadrants and where people are, it's just like, right, not everyone's going to be in the same place. People are in different places of their learning and their experience with it. And so it's just great to be able to have places and ways to talk about all those ways, all those places to be in that process. Next up, we have Haley Joelle Smith. Will be presenting undergraduates value learning about regenerative sanitation systems, insights for teaching about urine-derived fertilizers. Haley's research focuses on socio-environmental systems and education of water and wastewater systems. She is a PhD candidate at the University of Georgia in water resources and part of the Human Environmental Change Lab. She is also board of director of FLUSH, which stands for Public Hygiene Lets Us Stay Human. Haley, are you able to unmute yourself and share your screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Haley.
Sweet. I'm really excited to be here again, and I'm going to just get right to it. So this presentation, I'm going to be sharing with you a module that I developed for 1 week. It includes a couple of lectures, a homework, and a lab, and I'm not identifying where everything is. It's more of a progression, but I'm going to be happy to share these resources with you if you would like them. I'm going to give you some results along the way, so it's going to be a little bit of a tag team, and then in the end, I'll give you some recommendations. This work is a building off of what I presented last year at the summit, which was this conceptual model of how do we actually make change and what sort of things we need to consider to help move the dial forward so that people are in a space that they want to adopt these systems. This is also really influenced by different conversations that I've had at this summit around the need for undergraduate educational resources that are really comprehensive. So I've tried to meet that need, and I'm excited to share it with you. So just sort of from a theoretical standpoint, the design aspects that I've aligned this with is, one is connecting toilet systems with water literacy. being able to focus on how our invisible infrastructure functions and meets our needs. And that means that we need to talk about the social domain, the environmental domain, and the actual physical infrastructure. The other, uh-oh, what's going on? Oh no. I'm having technical difficulties.
Haley, do you want to try like unsharing and resharing?
Sure. Bummer. Does anyone have an idea as to why I'm not able to advance my slides now?
See an arrow on the bottom left of your slide that might be pushable, if you can see it.
I can't see it, but I went there and it worked. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're back at it. All right. The other really important considerations are, how do we make a safe environment for students to talk about this taboo, and bringing in some of what we know around how people respond to feeling shameful. And then putting the students really at the center of the system. And so I have the flush sign there because I want to acknowledge that a lot of my insights into how we appropriately create a learning progression to get people to move in this direction comes from my work with Flush. The other part is really bringing in this active learning pedagogy, so some best practices of student engagement and learning, being able to scaffold students enough so that they can synthesize information, and then finally getting them to a place where they can imagine changing. So one of the first steps was establishing a framework, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but you can see that it's a bit of a laundry list of the different things that would need to be talked about and explored to really have a comprehensive understanding of a particular water and wastewater system. So starting the conversation in the module begins with getting students to bring in some of their systems thinking skills to solve this idea of a wicked problem, which means that there is a big social component to wicked problems. And how I've addressed that is really directly talking about the evolutionary physiological reasons for disgust and the cultural reasons why we have an adversity. Some of this is also covered in a TED Talk, which was part of their homework assignment. And a takeaway is that students really appreciated this aspect of the module. And they say it's because it was important for them to learn about why it was a taboo. It helped give them a framework to be more comfortable to broach the topic in conversation with others, and to anticipate how people might react. The next big step in the module was really just teaching how the systems function. So some of this was drawing from the literature that there's an established 7 different elements of the water and wastewater system, going from the source and treatment, storage, distribution, usage, distribution, treatment again, and then back to a source, and using a variety of tools, including a hands-on model that actually moves water through those different elements. And there's a couple QR codes. Those are to videos that show the different models, one of them being for a decentralized system, the septic system, and the other being for a more urban environment. Students found that this was really helpful for unveiling this invisible infrastructure. A lot of the students in this course at University of Georgia, they're from a rural area. They have a septic tank, and they've said that they knew there was a box. They didn't know how it worked because it's underground. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And so to be able to actually see a replica was really cool for them. In this conversation from a focus group, the students agreed with that, saying that models were definitely the most helpful for understanding how everything works. So once students experienced that, we see that they did increase in being able to draw how their system works. So this kind of gets into using diagrams for understanding students' mental models. And what we see was before the module, they had a really limited understanding of the systems that they use every day. And after the module, that increased to become more expert-like. And you can see an example there of one student drawing, which was pretty typical, and how their drawing became more accurate and detailed. Students themselves identified that they became more familiar. And this is a key part of water literacy, because water literacy is also that people have a sense of familiarity. So do they identify themselves as knowing? And that sort of attitude is critical for people feeling empowered and motivated to make decisions. And so what we saw is toward the beginning of the module, students, they knew they used a toilet, or maybe they learned something, but they didn't really know much. And then after the module, they're identifying as knowing the basics, and some feeling like their knowledge was comprehensive. After the knowing of like how just those systems work, the part of the module then tries to connect it to other systems. So this is where we're looking at how wastewater is connected to energy systems and food systems. And to do this, a series of diagrams was used, these infographics, and just working through those with the students to get them to start understanding how they are part of a larger system, and there's a lot that comes before, and there's a lot that goes after they eat and then use the toilet. The next part of the module is opportunities for change. So this is where the fun part for us is that we get to introduce that we can change this paradigm. There's other opportunities, there's other systems. And so here's a list of the systems that I covered in the module with them. And this little question here of like, who likes the idea of making a natural resource is just an example of this idea of active learning, that throughout the module, there's little points of engagement to get students to reflect, to talk with each other, or to share. The other opportunities for change involve actually showing them a Clivus mulchum compost toilet system, doing a guided meditation that invites them to think about themselves as part of the system, and then going through more system diagrams that are of different human-derived fertilizers. So the one on the top left is that I got some human manure from Kalash Eco Village. We've got some urine from Rich Earth Institute, some biosolids, and then some struvite from a system that is in Georgia. Here's a little closer example of part of the lab is to actually have the physical sample that they observe and think about, to use the diagram, thinking about the pros and the cons from a social domain, from an environmental, and from infrastructure, and then actually looking at what the lab reports are, like what is actually in that particular product. And those samples were something that I processed in an environmental lab here at UGA. The next step is to invite them to imagine their ideal system. So they did an essay and had to write about what their ideal for their future home system would look like, and then to provide different reasons for why they would choose that system. And there's an image there of just what the rubric looked like. So they were guided into, you know, the type of topics they needed to talk about. So what did students choose? This is out of 46 students, and most of them said that their ideal system would be a regenerative system. And a lot of them went with this compost toilet, partly because maybe they've seen it. Some of them specifically do talk about urine diversion. Some of them want their conventional system, for instance, the sewer, but they also want the struvite. And then some of them really talk about wanting a conventional system. An interesting finding about the conventional systems is that they are talking about wanting to maintain them and to be able to have them as a safe sanitation option. So a little more interesting, and this is the work that Jamina has been helping me with the essays, is why they want these systems. And we've come up with 5 main themes. They talk about they want something that's practical. So this is economical and effective, that it just does the job. They want wise use of resources. So this is water conservation and nutrient cycling, agriculture. They want something that's socially acceptable. So they really like the flush toilet, and they want it to be familiar and not have to change habits. They want to create something good. And they talk about that being creating a garden for themselves, creating beauty. They like that it might be a system that mimics nature, which means it's using natural processes, ecosystems, and not harsh chemicals. They also talk about what they do not want, which is really boils down to causing harm from pollution. They speak about not wanting to hurt their neighbors or other communities, the natural environment, and having systems that contribute to climate change because they use a lot of fossil fuels. So students, we find they share what they learn with others, that 96% of students talked with friends, families, roommates. And what they talked about was how our current systems work and some of the challenges, alternative systems. And some of those conversations really led into a general concept of sustainability and how their toilet system can be connected to some of their values around sustainability. We see that students valued what they learned, and this is out of an understanding of how they recommend the module. They recommend it to people who are learning about or working in the environment. Something that surprised us was that they talk about that children need to learn this. They advocate that this education should be in a quick K through 12 curriculum. And then some say that everyone, all people who use the toilet should use it. And this is just a really classic quote of, I think everyone should have an understanding of what's going on. It's pretty basic stuff that we literally use like every 30 minutes of our life. And then another student saying, why didn't I know about this a lot sooner? I wish it was more of an emphasis on this sort of education starting younger. So students were really surprised that they hadn't learned about this before. So my takeaways from this research right now are to give you some insights for teaching about toilet systems, explain the actual reasons why people might be feeling an adversity to talk about human excrement, frame it within water literacy is a helpful way for us to broach this topic, speak to the practical and social aspects of the system. Remember, people don't want to cause harm. They actually want to do good. So we can focus on how systems can help people do good. And then be aware of the power of word of mouth that spreads. So thank you for listening today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Haley. It's been a treat reading those essays with you, and just so inspiring to hear how excited students get once they've learned what sort of options are out there and what the current status quo is doing in the world. So we have a few questions in the chat, and if you're still coming up with questions, I think some folks did this and just an encouragement to others who are going to ask questions right now or later in the day to make sure that the name of the person that your question was directed towards is mentioned in the chat. That would be really helpful for us. And so there was a question, I believe, for Corinna from Brightwater Tools. I think Kim Nace asked this question. Will you be applying for permission to use human urine in the future for this project? Corinna, if you're still on the line.
Yeah. Yes, so the project is just going until the end of November. So for this project, no, but we have another project that we want to start, like in the same direction. We want to like enlarge the whole concept to more like to a broader project for the whole of Germany, and there we plan also to use real human urine, but yeah, let's see how, if it works and if we can get the permission.
Awesome, thank you. I saw that there were some questions that were asked and then also answered about being able to see, I think, Sarah's writing, so that was already answered in the chat. And then Sarah had a great question about the social justice element of this work. So if anybody wanted to speak to her question that she was asking during her talk, I'll take a moment for that and then we'll go into a break. And Sarah, if you wanted to reframe that question succinctly in this moment, you're invited to.
So what I was saying was like a teaser to keep talking about social justice, but I think what I really would like to say with regards to that is that this is embedded in organizing in a similar strategic way that Haley demonstrated embedding it in a classroom. And so for a group like Golden Ribbon Commission, for example, that's like working on these building codes and regulations and, you know, developing materials, one thing I've appreciated about their analysis is like it also can take into account historic questions of that, which has to do in the US with redlining and where there's been investment in which neighborhoods and addressing these urban renewal projects. So I think that continuing to talk about our work embedded in a larger framework of social and ecological justice will have a lot of strength in terms of building the allies that we hope to build.
Agreed. Thank you. Apologies, I misunderstood that. And I totally agree. Thank you so much. Well, we're going to take a 10-minute break and come back at 10:30 for our recorded urine research facility tours. I'm excited to see what else is happening out there. So go ahead and turn off your screen, grab a drink of water, go to the bathroom, whatever you got to do. And we'll see you back here at 10:30 Eastern time, obviously. 10 minutes.